fact that he had brain activity again. And I had actually just gotten on the phone with my dad, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to talk about. I know I'm going to share my testimony, but I've got to have some kind of scripture to go along with it, and I have no idea what I'm going to say. And my dad was like, just wait, it'll happen. And I'm like, but Dad, I'm not a very patient person. If anybody actually knows me, they know that. But while I was on the phone, it came to me to be content in what we have and why we have it. So I've got about 4 or 5 scriptures here. First one's come from Philippians 4:11 through 13. Now that I speak of in respect of want, I have learned that whatever state I'm in, therewith be content. I know how to be abased and how to be abound. Every which in all things I am instructed to be full and to be hungry, both bound and suffer need. I can do all things in Christ which strengthen me. I'll be honest with y'all, as soon as I got the news yesterday, I thought about calling Pastor Roger and telling him I couldn't stand it. But something told me that I had to. So, I just hope I make it through this. It says, in Hebrews 13:5, let your conversation be without covetousness, and be content in such things as ye have, for he has said, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. A little bit about my testimony. Whenever I was born, the doctors walked in. I had to be born with a C-section, so my mom was knocked out under anesthesia. But they walked into the room with my dad, and they told him that they didn't know how mentally retarded I'd be, but I'd be mentally retarded. I had water trapped between my brain and my skull, and I had air trapped in between my chest wall and my organs. I was suffocating, and my brain wasn't able to work. My dad looked at him and told him to run the test again. They said, sir, you don't understand. We've already got a chopper on the way from CMC. We're going to take him from Gaston Memorial to CMC. He's going to get a shunt in his head, a shunt in his chest. We're going to drain the water. We're going to drain the air. But we don't know how retarded he's going to be, but he is going to be retarded. My dad looked at him again and said, run the test again. They argued back and forth for a little while, and finally they listened to my dad. They went back to run the test. 4.5 hours later, they come back scratching their heads with 2 sets of x-rays. They handed them to my dad, and they said, this is the x-rays that had the water in the air, and now it's gone. We don't know what happened, but now it's gone. So my dad looked at him and told him to mark it down to hereditary because it was his father. Now fast forward about 20 years, the little boy in the car over there, we took him to the same doctor. He looks down at the paperwork and he says, Ryan Sapp. I had a Sapp once. And I just smiled at him. I said, Dr. Fisher, it's me. I was like, I never ended up being retarded. I'm here and this is my son now. So I didn't know what I needed as a baby, but God knew. I didn't know why that happened, but God knew. Come to find out, my dad walked out into the hallway of the waiting room after getting in touch with everybody he knew, and my granddad got in touch with people he knew. And my dad told me the story years and years down the road that he was scared. He didn't know why he just told the doctors to wait. But he knew that he needed to. And he said that while he was walking through the hallway, he felt a hand on his shoulder as clear as day. He said he turned around and there was nobody there, so he knew that God was with him. And then come to find out at the age of 16, I was teaching adult Sunday school at the church. And then I ran as far and as fast as I could. We was talking about the lineage I come from. Every male in my family, and most of the females in my family, are involved in church in some way, shape, form, or fashion. I had musicians, preachers, pastors, everything. My uncle just got a position in the Church of God. He's the head of the ministries outreach or something now for the state of North Carolina. So I come from a long line of ministers. And when I was 8 years old, I actually heard the voice of God speak to me as you hear me right now. I knew what I was supposed to do. I didn't want to. So at 17 years old, I joined the Army. And I got married at 18. I volunteered for deployment, had my first child at 19. About 20 years old, I was overseas fighting a war that I didn't understand. I made it through a year in Iraq without any scratches, any bruises, any scrapes, any dings, any dents, nothing. I walked away from a war without any kind of physical damage to my body. I come back home, and I fought, and I bleeded, and I fled again. And then in October 2010, I come home in June. In October 2010, my dad flew from North Carolina to Washington State, packed me up in a U-Haul, and drove me back home. I was an alcoholic. I was on a very dangerous road. I gave up on everything. I had just lost both of my kids in a divorce. I had lost everything I had. She refused to let me see them. She refused to let me do anything with them. And now I'm all the way across the country from them. I'm back at my mom and dad's house. I felt like I was an adult. I didn't need to be at my mom and dad's house. So I was going through all sorts of problems. And it got to the point where I just didn't want to do it anymore. And I just made the decision to give up. I was just going to drink myself to death. I went to church with my mom and dad because my mom asked me to. And that day, it hit me that I was being stupid. And there's no other way of putting it. I was being stupid. And I pretty much crawled back up to the altar. And it's been an ongoing struggle since. I don't always do what I'm supposed to do. I don't always say what I'm supposed to say, but I try. You know, I got 2 little boys in the car. I can't help my oldest 2 kids, but I can show them what it's like to be a man. And that is the biggest thing for me right now. My wife, you know, she supports me in what I'm doing. I mean, let's face it, she does not like what's going on in the world right now with this virus and everything, but here she stands because I'm standing up here today. And my family supported me, and then when we came here, because Todd and Melissa invited us to come, I walked in, and the first thing I said to her was, "This is home." Amen. I'd only been here one time, and I knew that I was where I was supposed to be. As y'all know what was going on with my brother-in-law and everything, you know, my sister, she doesn't go to church, she's not where she needs to be. And my prayer is that out of this, somehow, she gets back into church and back into where she needs to be. Because even through everything she's dealt with, she has seen how God can bless her when she's doing what she's supposed to do. God made a way for us to get her a new vehicle. He made a way for us to get my mom a new vehicle because it was actually my mom and dad's car that he wrecked. She has been overwhelmed with the outpouring of people coming out on Facebook and reaching out to her. And some of those are people sitting in this congregation, so I appreciate that. I really do. You know, one of the points I wanted to make was even when we don't feel like we're doing the right thing, God is enough. And we just got to remember that God is enough. You know, a lot of times we get wrapped up in the details of what we want out of life. And you know, we want a bigger house or we want a nicer car or whatever. But realistically, God is enough, and we need to just focus on that. Amen. When the prophet was out in the wilderness, he commanded the crows to come and feed him. He told him to drink out of the river, and the crows would bring him food. I'm not worried about what's going on in this world with this pandemic or anything else that's going on. You know, everybody's like, the whole world's ending in 2020, and the world's not ending. It's just a matter of the fact that people aren't doing what they're supposed to, and God's trying to tell you to wake up. Amen. And I know that as for me and my house, we serve the Lord, and that He will survive, He will provide for us no matter what. We will have what we need. And I want to throw out something that my Aunt Melissa said the other day, and she is my aunt, whether we're in-laws or outlaws or whatever. We was on the phone the other day, and she made a point, and I've actually been over there and seen this. When in the Bible days, families wasn't just you, your wife, and your kids. Families was you, your wife, your kids, your in-laws, your outlaws, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins. It was everybody. They didn't live in the same building, but all the buildings were connected, and that whole strip was considered their house. So when it says it's for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, it's not just talking about you and your immediate family. It's talking about your brothers, your sisters, your aunts, your uncles, and everybody else. I believe that my family will be made whole through this process. I believe that my wife's cousins, the one that she was asking about, that's my family. I believe that they're going to be made whole through this process. I believe that my sister is going to come back to God. I believe that one day I'm going to be able to sit down and look and know beyond a shadow of a doubt where all of my family is going to go, regardless of what happens, because that is the God I serve. That is my prayer. That is my want and that is my need. And He said, I will grant you the needs and the wants of your heart, the desires of your hearts. My desire is for my family to be saved. I appreciate y'all. I love y'all. Please keep me in your prayers as this time goes forward. I have no idea what to even say to my sister. I haven't talked to her yet, physically talked to her. We spoke through text messages. Um, she's got a big deal to go through. She's got to set up the memorial service and things like that. But just keep her in your prayers, and that something through all this process will make her know that, God's still there. It doesn't seem fair, because he's only like 34, I think, 33 or 34. It doesn't seem fair when a young person gets taken. But the fact of the matter is, he's not hurting anymore. He doesn't have to go through the battle that he was going to have to go through if God had left him here. Because, he had a broke leg, he had other broken bones, he had brain damage. He was going to be on a long road to recovery. It had been months and maybe years before he was ever fully healed again. But now, in an instant, in a twinkling of an eye, he was fully healed. And I just want my sister to be able to see that, because God did answer our prayer. I love y'all. Thank you.